Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Okay, so imagine this. Imagine a guy who dedicates his entire life to defending God.
Mm.
I mean, this guy who writes books about God, he talks about God constantly. He basically breathes the concept of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of being celebrated, as a saint or a prophet, he gets kicked out of his community, cursed. Cursed in the most violent way you can imagine, and labeled a dangerous atheist.
Yeah.
That is the story of Baruch Spinoza. He was a 17th century philosopher who looked at religion and just said, I think we're doing this all wrong. He wanted to drag God away from superstition and fear and into the world of pure science and logic.
It's a huge
A
conflict.
massive one. A man who insisted he was God's greatest champion, while the world treated him like a heretic because he dared to strip God of personality, of judgment, and of miracles. If you like my channel, please subscribe, press the like button.
It really is one of the most dramatic misunderstandings in the history of philosophy. And to get it, we have to look at the source material we're using for this deep dive.
Right.
We're digging into Spinoza's life and his big one, his magnum opus, a book called Ethics.
Okay.
And our mission here is pretty specific. We want to understand his attempt to completely transform religion. He didn't want it to be about divine intervention or scary stories. He wanted it to be a discipline of logic that could actually, provide real comfort.
But it cost him.
Oh, it cost him everything. It came with a very, very heavy price.
So let's unpack this, because usually when you hear philosophy, you kind of think of, old guys in togas or boring lectures. But Spinoza's life was actually pretty high stakes. Who was this guy?
He was born in 1623 in the Jewish quarter of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And to really get why his story is so tragic, you have to understand the setting.
Yeah.
Amsterdam at that time was this bustling, wealthy hub of commerce, the Dutch Golden Age. But for the Jewish community there, it was a sanctuary.
Right. They weren't just there for the tulips and canals.
Not at all. Far from it. Spinoza's ancestors were Sephardic Jews. They had fled the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and Portugal because of the Catholic Inquisition. Wow.
We're talking about people whose families had been burned at the stake, forced to convert, or expelled back in 1492. So you arrived in the Netherlands as refugees.
So you've got a community that is incredibly protective of its identity. They've literally fought to keep their faith alive through generations of trauma.
Exactly. And they were terrified of rocking the boat.
Right.
They needed to show the Dutch Christian authorities that they were good Jews, that they weren't atheists or troublemakers.
And into this tense environment comes Baruch Spinoza. Baruch, which literally means blessed in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And he was supposed to be the star pupil, right? The golden boy.
He was. He attended the yeshiva, the religious school. He was brilliant. He knew the scriptures backward and forward. He was being groomed to be a rabbi, a pillar of that very fragile community.
But then the turn happens.
Yep.
He starts going off script.
He does. Despite all that training, or maybe, because of it, Spinoza started asking questions that you just weren't supposed to ask. He began distancing himself from the ancestral beliefs.
There's a quote where he reflects on this, saying he felt the need to embrace other views.
And he didn't just embrace them quietly in a journal somewhere. He wrote them all down in what became his masterpiece, Ethics. Now, I was looking at this source material, and I have to say, this is the weirdest religious book I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It doesn't read like the Bible at all. It reads like a math textbook.
That is a great observation, and it's completely intentional. He wrote it in a style called Mos Geometricus, the geometric method. Spinoza literally uses axioms, definitions, propositions, and proofs, just like Euclid did for geometry.
Wait. So he's trying to prove God exists using geometry proofs?
Yes. He believed that ethics and happiness and God were as certain and provable as the angles of a triangle. He didn't want to just preach. He wanted to prove the nature of the universe.
And that's where he rewrites the definition of God.
That's where he rewrites everything, which gets us right into the core conflict of his life.
Okay, let's get into the specifics, because this is where it gets really controversial. The source material gives us a list of things that Spinoza says God is not. And honestly, it's a list of everything most people think God is.
It's a complete deconstruction. First and foremost, Spinoza argues that God is not a person.
Okay, so no guy in the clouds with a white beard?
Precisely. God is not a craftsman or an architect who, built the world and then stepped back to watch it all happen. God is not a king. God is not a judge.
This is the part that really struck me. He says, God doesn't hear prayers and doesn't perform miracles.
No miracles. This was a massive heresy. For Spinoza, God is the laws of nature. If a miracle happens, say the sun stands still or water turns to wine, that would mean breaking the laws of nature.
Uh-huh.
And for Spinoza, that would mean God is contradicting himself because God is the law.
So he completely strips away the carrot and the stick. No heaven, no hell.
Correct. The source highlights that according to Spinoza, there is no life after death. Human beings are not the chosen creatures of God. God doesn't have a special plan for you. God has no expectations.
That sounds incredibly lonely. I mean, he even says God sees nothing in the human sense.
That's right. He writes that God has no goals, no desires. God isn't sitting there waiting for you to be good so he can reward you. In Spinoza's view, anyone who sees themselves as God's special child is just. Well, they're just projecting their own imagination onto the universe.
It reminds me of that old joke. If triangles had a god, God would be a triangle.
Spinoza actually used almost that exact analogy. He said if a triangle could speak, it would say that God is eminently triangular. We project our human personality, our anger, our jealousy, our love onto the divine. Spinoza wanted to wipe that slate clean.
So if God isn't a judge or a father figure or a king, and he's not doing miracles, why isn't Spinoza just an atheist? I mean, if I described a God who doesn't care about you and is just like gravity, most people would say that's not God.
And that is the million-dollar question. Spinoza insisted he wasn't an atheist. In fact, he was deeply offended by the label. He called himself a God-intoxicated man. But his God was impersonal. Spinoza's God is completely indistinguishable from what we might call nature, or existence, or just the universe.
So God is the universe.
Yes. But not just the physical stuff like rocks and trees. God is the energy, the logic, the laws of physics, the truth that holds everything together. There's that key phrase from the source. Everything that exists is in God, and nothing can exist or be conceived without him.
It's pantheism, right?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
As a natural God or nature, it changes the dynamic completely. If God is the system of cause and effect, then God doesn't have a personality. You can't hurt God's feelings. You can't please him. He just is.
Which leads us to one of the most blistering parts of his philosophy, prayer.
Yeah.
Because if God is just the laws of physics, what on earth is the point of praying? I can't pray to gravity to not let me drop my phone.
Spinoza would say that is exactly right. He spent a lot of time dismantling the idea of petitionary prayer. Usually when people pray, what are they doing? They're asking God to change the way the universe works to benefit them personally.
Right. Please let me get this job. Please let my team win the game.
Yeah.
Please don't let it rain on my wedding.
Like, exactly. And Spinoza thought that was just ridiculous. He called it childish narcissism.
Childish narcissism. Ouch. He's not pulling any punches there.
He really isn't. I mean, follow his logic. You're asking the infinite, eternal substance of the universe to rewrite the immutable laws of physics just because you want a sunny day for your party. He thought it was the absolute height of human arrogance.
So what are we supposed to do? Just sit there and take it?
No, we're supposed to align ourselves with reality. Instead of, sending messages into the sky asking for favors, our job is to understand how and why the universe functions the way it does.
There's a paradox here that I love, but it's also kind of sad. The source quotes Spinoza saying, "Whoever loves God cannot strive that God should love him in return."
It's one of his most famous and most difficult lines. It frames the relationship as a one-way street. You love God by understanding the universe, by engaging with truth, but you can't expect the universe to love you back.
So it's not a transaction?
Not at all. It's an intellectual and spiritual acceptance of reality.
This sounds an awful lot like Stoicism. Was he reading the old Romans?
Oh, he absolutely was. Spinoza was deeply influenced by the ancient Greek and Roman Stoics, particularly Seneca. Their whole philosophy was about aligning your will with reality to avoid suffering.
There's a great analogy from Seneca that Spinoza loved, the one about the dog on the leash. Can we break that down?
Yes, it's the perfect visualization of Spinoza's ethics. So imagine a dog tied by a leash to a moving cart.
Okay.
The cart represents necessity, or the laws of nature. The cart is going to move forward no matter what. It has its own momentum. The dog, that's us, has two choices.
Right. Choice one, the dog can walk willingly alongside the cart. It accepts that it's on a leash, it matches the pace, and it has a relatively smooth journey. It can even, enjoy the scenery.
Or choice two, the dog resists. It digs its heels in, it barks, it struggles, it tries to go the other way. But the cart is stronger. So what happens? The dog just ends up being dragged and strangled. The cart still goes where it's going, but now the dog suffers terribly.
That is a brutal image, but it makes the point perfectly. Spinoza is saying we are all on that leash. We don't have free will in the way we usually think about it.
Exactly. We are part of the chain of cause and effect. And wisdom for Spinoza is realizing you're on the leash. It's not about protesting, why did this happen to me? It's about understanding how it happened, biologically, politically, physically, and adapting to it. The wise person walks willingly.
So instead of reading the Bible to find out what God wants, Spinoza would say we should study what? Science.
Essentially, yes. He suggests that the best way to know God is to understand how life and the universe actually work. Through psychology, philosophy, the natural sciences, that is how you get closer to the divine.
The source mentions two ways of viewing life that Spinoza developed. This gets a little trippy, but I think it's really useful for modern life. There's the egoist view and the eternal view.
This is absolutely central to his ethics. The egoist view is when we see things through the lens of time. We see things as limited, biased, and emotional. We judge things based entirely on how they affect us right now.
Okay, so let's apply this. I'm stuck in traffic. I'm going to be late for something. I'm getting angry. That's the egoist view.
Yes, this is bad because it is hurting me. But Spinoza encourages us to try for the eternal view, sub specie eternitatis, or under the aspect of eternity. This means seeing the whole picture, trying to see things from God's perspective.
So from the perspective of the universe, my traffic jam isn't bad. It's just cars on a road.
Right. It's a result of urban planning, population density, maybe an accident 5 miles ahead, friction, combustion. It's just cause and effect. It's not a personal attack on you.
That actually sounds like a cure for road rage or like FOMO.
It is. If you can zoom out and just see the mechanism, that anger evaporates. Spinoza redefines good and bad based on this. He says we normally define bad as just things that block our personal goals, but true ethics requires rising above that self-interest.
And the goal of all this is peace of mind.
Yes. The goal is what he calls blessedness, a mind that's free from guilt, pity, shame, or anger. If you understand why someone acted the way they did because of their background, their trauma, their biology, you stop hating them. You start to understand them as part of the mechanism.
Okay, so that's the philosophy. It's logical, it's scientific, it's stoic. It sounds very modern, actually. But let's go back to Amsterdam in the 1650s. We have this Jewish refugee community that is terrified of persecution. And here comes Spinoza saying, actually, your rituals are superstitions and your prayers are narcissism. How did that go over?
As you can imagine, it was a total disaster. The community leaders, they pleaded with him to just be quiet. They even offered him a pension, basically a bribe to just outwardly conform.
But he wouldn't do it.
Spinoza wouldn't fake it.
So in 1656, the hammer dropped. They issued the cherem, the excommunication. But the source makes it really clear. This wasn't just a polite, please leave our club note. This was a curse.
It was incredibly violent language, unlike almost any other ban issued at that time. The rabbis issued a decree that effectively erased him from the community.
I have the text here from the source, and it really sends shivers down my spine. Listen to this. Cursed be he by day, and cursed be he by night. Cursed be he when he lies down, and cursed be he when he rises up.
And it went on. They invoked the judgment of angels. They forbade anyone from communicating with him, from doing business with him, from standing within 4 cubits of him, or even reading anything he ever wrote.
It was total social death. He lost his family, his friends, his home, everything.
And remember the context we talked about earlier, the fear. The Jewish leaders did this partly to protect the community. They had to show the Christian authorities, look, we are cutting out this cancer. We are not atheists. Spinoza was the sacrifice.
So Spinoza, the blessed, becomes the cursed. He was forced to leave Amsterdam. Did he fight back? Did he write some angry manifesto?
And that's the most amazing part. He didn't. He lived his philosophy. He reportedly said, they do not force me to do anything that I would not have done of my own accord.
Wow.
He moved to The Hague, lived very quietly, and worked as a lens grinder.
A lens grinder, like for glasses and telescopes?
Yes, and for telescopes and microscopes. It's poetic, really. His whole philosophy was about helping people see the truth more clearly, and his day job was literally polishing lenses to help people see the world more clearly. He lived humbly in rented rooms until he died in 1677, probably from inhaling glass dust.
It's a tragic ending, but also weirdly dignified. He walked with the cart.
He did. He truly walked with the cart.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting for us today. Spinoza is famous now. I mean, he's considered the father of the Enlightenment in some ways. Hegel loved him. Einstein said he believed in Spinoza's God. But the source argues that his religion of reason never really caught on with the masses. We don't have the first church of Spinoza on every corner.
That's the critical analysis at the end of our source material. Spinoza failed to convince the majority of people to abandon traditional religion. And the reason is simple, almost banal. He forgot about human psychology.
He treated religion like it was just a logic problem.
Exactly. He thought if he could just prove the superstitions were illogical with his geometry proofs, that people would just drop them. But the source points out that people don't come to religion just for facts or for logic.
Right. We want community. We want the rituals. The source lists things like shared meals, annual traditions, beautiful architecture, music, the sweet language of the synagogue or the church.
And comfort. Spinoza's universe is cold, it's indifferent, it's beautiful, sure, the way a mathematical equation is beautiful. But if your mother dies, Spinoza's ethics just tells you it is the law of nature, you must accept it.
Yeah, that doesn't really help you in the funeral home.
It doesn't. The Bible, or the Quran, or other traditions, they offer a support structure. They offer a God who listens, a God who cares, a God who cries with you. Even if Spinoza's ethics contains more scientific truth, the traditional religions offer more emotional utility.
That is such a key distinction. Truth versus utility. Spinoza offers a textbook on physics. Religion offers a shoulder to cry on.
Precisely. Spinoza totally ignored the power of art, of belonging, of emotion. He assumed humans were purely rational creatures who would always choose truth over comfort. But history shows us that the superstitious religions he mocked continued to thrive because they address this deep, irrational, emotional needs that we all have.
So what does this all mean for us? We've got this brilliant guy who offers us a shortcut to a peaceful mind through radical acceptance. Understand the mechanism, he says. Stop yelling at the sky.
It is a powerful tool, especially in our world today. We are constantly bombarded with information, things that upset us, politics, social media outrages. Spinoza offers a way to step back and look at it all under the aspect of eternity, to say, this is happening according to causes and laws. It can calm the anxiety. It can help you sleep at night.
But the warning from the source is also real. You can't just logic your way through life. We aren't robots. We need that feeling of connection.
That is the tension. Spinoza gives us the how, but he strips away the who. He gives us a universe we can understand, but not one that cares about us.
It raises a huge question about the future of how we see the world.
Yeah.
As we get more scientific, do we lose that comfort?
It does. And here's a final provocative thought to leave you with, based on what we've talked about. We often think that as science advances, old superstitions will just naturally die out because they're wrong. But Spinoza's failure teaches us something different. You cannot destroy a belief system just with logic. You have to replace the feeling it provides. Spinoza couldn't do that. So the question is, can we ever build a rational worldview, a scientific religion maybe, that satisfies the human heart as much as it satisfies the brain? Or are we destined to always split our lives between cold facts and comforting illusions?
That is something to chew on. Can you find holiness in a math book? I don't know, but Spinoza certainly try. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into Spinoza.
It's been a pleasure.
See you next time.